everything.
I believe the people who are oppressing that education are definitely far right. The far right must destroy education. The far right must make sure that education is monoculture. And an example of a monoculture education system is a religious school. They are very broad, their definition of not only far right, but the quintessential of being a fascist. So we're all capable.
So I take it very pro-multicultural, is that right?
I'm pro human beings growing up with each other and learning what it is to be different. Because if you grow up somewhere
with the essence of multicultural.
No, it's not just about, it's about cultures, multicultures and different skins and sexual orientation.
You seem against monoculture, you're quite against that.
I'm definitely against monoculture.
And what about if the people just free decided to live by themselves? What about the ghettos? What about the people who arrive to this country, they feel unsafe and they just decide to create the ghettos just to keep themselves with the people of the
country? A ghetto is not created to keep the individual safe. Do you not know what a ghetto is? If you don't mind me asking, what is your background? What's your background, if you don't mind me asking?
Do you want to guess?
Do I want to?
I'm Spanish.
You're stood right in front of me,
Spanish.
and you want me to guess what your background is?
What's important for this discussion? My background is not relevant for this.
Oh, I'm sorry for asking questions about the world. Obviously, I'm a bleeding
world.
criminal
Asking
somebody where they come from or what they defined as. Lady,
I don't have any problem to tell you. I'm just asking why is that relevant to
I think
this
if you think someone's asking questions of you is a crime, then maybe you need to take a long, good, hard look at yourself. The very definition of what I'm talking about is asking questions of people, is asking where you come from, what you believe in.
I'm also asking questions.
And if you want to get angry and aggressive, that's fair enough.
Because you're just blanking
but
me.
that
it's
isn't,
really uncomfortable.
But that is not a normal way to be behaving.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Should apologize. I'm sorry.
Did I ask for an apology?
Yeah, you say.
I didn't ask for an apology.
It doesn't matter that she's from Spain.
Yeah,
she's right.
Where are you from? It was just a question.
Why is that important? Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, carry on what you're saying.
Thank you. What was the? Where was I? Schools, monoculture. Ghettos. Okay. This lady here doesn't know what a ghetto is.
But you want to explain?
So we have to define what a ghetto is. Unfortunately, it's very tragic, an individual or a society, a group of people not knowing what a ghetto is, because they're a horrific crime on society. And if you don't know what a ghetto is, how can you stop crimes from happening? Education, a decent education, will teach children what an actual crime is to begin with. Because then, from that point, you would reduce dramatically horrible acts happening. So an education, a ghetto is created by one group in society to keep another group repressed in permanent poverty and legal law, which is what they work in.
That's not the modern meaning. The meaning
that
of
is ghetto throughout all history, actually.
Jews. Yes, it came from the Jews in Venice.
No, it came from the Catholics on the Jews.
No. Yes,
that's where it came from.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And the Catholics said
you can
have your Jewish community, but you must live in absolute hell to have that. But the Catholic Church profited from the money and the workers in that community.
Yes,
but also there was Jewish leaders that profited from the poverty of Jewish people as well.
That's
a very important point to make.
You're factually incorrect.
Which is what goes back to my original statement, that religions are owned by the far right. Only a far-right nutter could create the concept of a ghetto. This is a monstrous action upon anybody in this community.
So you are telling that there is like a elite of wealthy guys that are locking a room and they're saying how we can plan to fuck up these people, and it's a kind of social engineering.
What do you think? It's magic?
I think
do you think it's magic?
I think it's a price.
Do you generally think that the world here today and the horrors that we see all happen from magic?
No, you think there's a conspiracy.
Your proposition is that everything is just natural. Crime is natural. Violence is natural. Crime upon community is natural.
Price system.
I believe that your education has definitely let you down. You don't know what a ghetto is. You think crimes happen from magic. That is unfortunately, hang on, I haven't finished yet. That's unfortunately how our schools, all schools, the majority of schools, sorry, especially religious schools, teach our generation. Question, thank you.
Who's to blame for the crime? Is it the criminal or society?
I've always stood on this platform for democracy, and I've also said we don't live in a democracy. And without a decent democracy or education, then crime for the individual is something which is responsible for the individual, but it's a society that is the true criminal, not the individual. Though I'm not saying individuals shouldn't go to prison, don't get me wrong. But society is the real criminal. Like in America, they've deemed it if you're black and poor, you're almost automatically a criminal. And you deserve, because the prisons in America are full with the poor and the black. There's a majority in those prisons. And not only that, they happily kill them, legally and illegally. So when we look to the individual, yes, there is individual responsibility. But if that individual has never had a chance to a democracy, has never had a chance to a decent education, has never had a chance to grow up living free of fear, fear of repression, fear of hatred, fear of debt, then there is no society. That breeds chaos and disorder and horrors. What breeds communities is education, is wealth. Wealth isn't just money. Wealth is knowledge. Being able to respect people that are different. Being able to understand that we can live together with different ideas. Wealth is letting an individual grow to their potential. We are not allowed that. The majority of the people in this world are never allowed that unless you're rich. Then that, under certain circumstances, you are allowed to grow.
Can I ask you a question?
Please do.
Why is it then that so often it's poor ethnic minority communities that have the strongest sense of community, whereas quite often in London especially, it seems like a lot of middle class white communities they don't really talk to their neighbours, they're quite isolated. I'm quite curious as to why that is.
Did you hear the question?
It was maybe a bit of a loaded question.
The gentleman here said, why do the poor have strong communities, or?
No, why is it poor communities that are mostly made up of either immigrants or ethnic minorities, they often have a stronger sense of community than
a stronger sense of community?
Yeah, why is that? Why?
Well, I don't believe that they're multicultural. I think they're just forced into a ghetto where they have to be. It isn't done by choice. The middle class and the upper class love to look down on the poor and say, oh, they're having a great time. They have a strong community. This is a lie. This is just a dream, a fantasy. In actual fact, the reality is that they have no choice. No choice but to be friendly and look after each other, because there is no other. Actually, I'll take that back. Actually, I've lost my thread of thought on that one. It is a middle class. It is a middle class fantasy that the poor have a community in the way they deem it is. In actual fact, it's just as broken as any community, because you're not allowed to have a strong community. Your community must be divided and must have boundaries. That's what the rich do on the poor, because without a broken and divided society, then you cannot have the rich. When I say rich, by the way, I'm talking about billionaires. I'm not talking about millionaires. They're just as poor, hopeless and useless as anybody else in society. So it is a fantasy and a vision, a fantasy of the world, that the poor actually have this ideal community. This is strictly not true.
So I'm a fantasist. Okay.
Pardon?
So I'm a fantasist for believing that ethnic minority neighbourhoods in
Yeah,
London tend to have a
because
stronger
when you're
sense of
poor, you can't have any legal representation.
community.
You've just got desperation when you're poor. Because you need money to be able to pay for legal systems, to be able to pay for the land you stand on, to be able to pay for a decent education. The upper middle class have this fantasy, and it keeps them alive. In actual fact, it's an absolute lie. Yes, a community to grow and to be genuinely strong, not just in the minds of the middle class, but to be generally strong, you need that community to have its own legal and framework in that community. Without that, you're just a fantasy. That's all the poor can ever be, unless the wealth is given to the people. And then a true community can grow, not just some middle class fantasy like our gentleman was here earlier. He's wealthy and he has this fantasy, and that keeps his mind and reality together. Hello people, welcome to Hyde Park. How are you doing this afternoon?
Good.
Is there any topics you'd wish to discuss?
Brexit.
I was just literally about to say, apart from Brexit. What particular about Brexit would you like to talk about? I'm not an expert on this though.
Donald Trump is the leader of Brexit.
Well, you're almost right. I would just make that a little, I would use a less individual term, make it more generic. The far right are actually in charge of Brexit. It was their vision and their dream. It was a far right fantasy that brought Brexit to life. And why did the far right want England out of Europe? It's so they could abuse the financial system to their heart's content. It was the finance people like, what's his name? I've forgotten his name. But it's Farage, part of the banking system. It's the banking system that wanted out of Europe, because Europe actually has some rules and regulations on money. Not much. I think it should have much more. But it was the quest to destroy law in England. That's what the far right wanted from Brexit, to destroy law. But then we've got people from the socialists, like Jeremy Corbyn. They wanted out of Europe. Do you know why they wanted out of Europe? What is their vision? It is the exact opposite of the far right. For them, Europe doesn't have enough laws over finance, over environment. The socialists, the left, they want out of Europe so they can create more law. And without more laws over the financial system, they will literally steal everything you've got. In their financial, what they call the financial crisis. In actual fact, the financial crisis, or recession, is the deliberate, legitimate economic rape of the people of the world. That's what the financial crisis is. That's what a recession is. That's what, when the banks collapse, that's what's happening. That is them literally just stealing your money. These are not financial crises. For them, this is the days of gold. The days of gold for the rich, because all that money disappears. But where does it go? It goes to the rich. And where does it come from? It comes from countries, people, and it's us that suffer from their theft. And they happily call it austerity. Happily call it austerity. When in actual fact, the people that call it that are the people that literally stole your money from your bank accounts. Your banks don't represent you. Your banks don't owe you anything. They're owned by the rich, for the rich. That's what the banks are. That's what the financial crisis is. And that's what they always do. This is what recession is.
How's it going, bro? All good.
This is what recessions are.
All good. How are you?
And when we have
Too bad.
people saying economic, financial crises are just natural in society, those people are the criminals, real criminals in society. And who suffers from their crime? Everyone suffers, apart from them. That's what financial crisis means. It means the economic rape of the people of this world. You don't own the banks, they do. And they've decided the money that you've worked every day for isn't yours anymore. And it's in actual fact the rich. It's our money. We deserve that. You deserve nothing. And unless you're a billionaire, then everybody is included in that statement. Being a millionaire don't make you rich enough to escape their hell, because your house can be taken away at any moment. Your business can be taken away at any moment. So you're in the same boat as everybody else. But it's the billionaires that walk away with all the wealth. That's their job. And that is what they call capitalism. They call that capitalism. That's what capitalism is. That's what it does. It justifies the legitimate economic rape of the people of this world. That's capitalism. That's what it stands for. That's what it's always stood for. And that's what it'll always in the future stand for. There's nothing wrong with making wealth. But that's not what capitalism is about. Capitalism is not about making wealth. There's nothing wrong with making wealth. Where capitalism comes in is it takes that wealth away. It legitimizes taking that wealth away. It legalizes taking that wealth away. It justifies it on moral purposes that you don't deserve that wealth. Your communities don't deserve that wealth. It has a moral quest. Because does anyone here know where capitalism comes from? Does actually anyone know who sat down and designed capitalism? Does anyone know this? Because we're not taught it in school. The church designed capitalism. It comes from Europe, and it was their economic policy to ensure their wars abroad, because wars are expensive. They don't come cheap. We're murdering the working class. That is an expensive pursuit. So the church invented an economic model, which they call capitalism. You can go online, anywhere online, and that will confirm what I'm saying about capitalism. The pursuit of capitalism is the pursuit of continuous war. That's where all the money's made. The majority of the wealth in this world comes directly from war. And that touches upon everybody in society, whether you're the person being shot or not. We're all under their cancerous economic capitalist war machine. We're all under that. Just look at physicists. Physicists, the smartest people in our society. Would you not agree? The majority of physicists are employed by the war machines in Oxbridge. That's where they do their work. That's where their departments get their majority of their wealth from. people that want to murder the working class people of the world en masse. Because that's what war is. The war is arming the poor with weapons to go and shoot other poor people with less powerful weapons. That is the very definition of war. That's what war does. It wipes out a whole class of people, and the ones that are left become frightened for their lives or are radicalized. So that's great for the war industry. They get to repress a class of people, a majority, repress it, and the ones that are left either repressed and lived in fear or become radicalized, therefore justifying their use of weapons all the time and creating new enemies. The capitalists create new enemies. It's an industry. It is their most profitable industry, creating people to be radicalized. And therefore we've got an enemy, and therefore the whole cycle of war keeps going round. And at the very heart and centre of that, laughing with champagne upon golden thrones, are the rich. Any questions, anyone? You have a question. Just lovely lady. Oh, can you come a bit closer? Sorry. All right, thank you. I'll come over to you. We're keeping this gentleman private. Oh, shit. A question from the audience. They've asked, do we have less wars now than we ever had? No, we do not have less wars now than we've ever had. And not only that, the capitalists invented something called the nuclear bomb. And that means that nuclear bomb not only can destroy a city, but it can literally destroy all complex organic life on this planet forever. That's what their capitalist threat is to the world. The capitalist threatens everyone with nuclear war. It's their weapons, the weapons of the rich, and they will happily use it if you want a society which yes, capitalism's war, an industry of war. Thank you very much. Are you still rolling? Oh, can I just say it tight? Can I just, capitalism. Do you want me to write this down? No, go ahead. Title for this, Leon, if you wouldn't mind, please, is Capitalism is the industry, purely the industry of war. Thank you very much.
Come take over everything from your humanity. Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. Listen. Man, don't listen to ITV.
Because how did Harry Potter reach us? You know the Senate of how Harry Potter reached us. You know the Senate of how Harry Potter reached us. J.K. Rowling's mind, to J.K. Rowling's pen on paper, to J.K. Rowling's publisher, to your book. The Quran? Come on the camera, be brave. Why? Tell us.